Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to go over my top 5 tips I think every single Yone player needs to know. Now, if you're new to my channel, my name is Lofit. I do educational content, do tips videos, guide videos, and I also do some counter videos. Recently did one on set. If you're struggling playing against that champion, I would love to help you out. Now, my goal behind this video is to make you a better League of Legends player, as well as to give you a better understanding of Yone as a whole, and hopefully help someone that is going to be looking to play Yone first time in your ranked games. Maybe have that game go a little bit smoother and he will not go 0-10. Now, I put timestamps every single part of my video. If you want to skip this intro, if you want to skip a certain tip, you are more than welcome to do so. I heavily value you guys' time, as well as I'm going to be putting a timestamps in the description, which it makes it so the scrolling bar is going to have segments. So if you want to find exactly where the next tip is just through the scrolling bar, you're too lazy to look up top, it's there for you as well. If you want to contact me directly, I'm going to put a link to my Discord as well as to my Twitch. And I heavily encourage you guys. I'm a bit limited in this format, only doing 5 tips. To add your own tips down below. He's going to be a very mechanical champion, in my opinion, that is going to have a lot of complexity to him. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. With all that out of the way, let's jump into tip number 1. Alright, and getting into tip number 1. Now, playing Yone, the most important thing that you need to understand while trading is the importance of your E. Some people might compare it to Z, similar to how you get a little bit of a dash and it leaves a clone behind you. But I am going to really emphasize the fact that I think it is extremely similar to Fizz. The way you play out your E is really going to determine how the all-in goes, and it can be used as both a offensive and a defensive tool. So when playing against champions with extremely important skill shots that determines the way trades go, it is really important to use this defensively in a way where you can also gain ground. So getting used to throwing out your E in an offensive and a defensive manner, maybe dodging the skill shot and getting closer to them, is going to be the optimal way to play it. For example, if there is a Syndra that is looking to do an E-stun on you, dodging that E-stun and gap closing in on her is going to leave her in a very, very rough situation. So always look to do trades with your E soul unbound in an advantageous way, because if you misuse this ability, you are going to struggle extremely heavily in the trade unless you are pretty far ahead of the enemy and it doesn't really matter. So there are a couple different ways. Obviously, using it in a offensive manner is really good, as well as just dodging out an important skill shot, particularly against champions that have very low consistent damage. Yone is going to be hyper effective because he has a lot of burst prevention with his W and a dodge on a skill shot on his E. He is going to struggle against people with a little bit more sustained damage that are able to stick on top of him very easily and have a decent understanding of his kit. Champions that come to mind would be something like a Jax or maybe an Aurelia. Can bully him, particularly in the early game before he gets too much of his crit multiplication that helps him scale quite heavily. So keep this in mind when you are looking to play Yone in the laning phase. And now we'll wrap up tip number 1. Alright, and jumping into tip number 2, I want to talk about one of his extremely strong strengths that a lot of people aren't going to respect, particularly early into his release when people are just starting to get used to playing against Yone. I want you guys to take a full advantage of this. And if you're playing in lower elos, like from iron to gold or iron to platinum, you will be able to take advantage of this pretty much at any point. So you want to look for choke points. If you didn't know, Yone has a crap ton of skill shots, and when you have a lot of skill shots, you are able to really increase the overall accuracy of hitting these skill shots when you have people that are in a condensed area. When playing Yone, you are able to really take advantage of these spots, and a lot of fights are going to occur in these around the dragon and the baron. How you want to look to augment it so that you can make these plays extremely easily would be with control wards, sweepers, and setting that up. Also, playing around these type of choke points, it is going to be great because you can E over a wall and really get in a good position to flank the enemy out of nowhere and set up a really strong engage. So working around these choke points, it is always best to wait for one of the enemies to kind of creep out a little bit bit, starting to commit, and then you use your skill shots however you want to play it. Maybe you want to start with a Q or a W or EQW and then into the R, or if you just want to start off the entire fight with just a E into an R like that. There are a bunch of different ways to play it, but the most important part that you guys get away from this is that you can control these kind of areas quite easily, as well as you want to wait for at least 1 or 2 people to commit, and they will be less likely to all turn around and just jump on you. Say you have all the enemies right here, and they look like they're a really juicy target, but they can all just walk back a little bit and then focus you. You want to have them as just really disorganized as possible. You want to cause as much chaos in the fights as possible when playing Yone, and in general when playing any assassin. You don't want to have these strict front-to-back team fights where something like a Vayne or a Sejuani would do extremely well into it. Alright, and that will wrap up tip number 2. Alright, and tip number 3, this is going to be about how you can look to snowball your lane. Now, the great thing about Yone is his ability to push waves with Immortal Steel in lanes that do not have much priority in the early game. This is really going to be, I think, where he can shine. In particular, say you're playing against something like a Kassadin, extremely low wave clear, very weak in the early game. How you can look to snowball quite easily on Yone is to take advantage of, overall, you're going to be a higher level than the enemy jungler. You're going to be able to push the Kassadin in, and you're going to be able to invade extremely easy against enemies at important buff sites. Make sure you ping your jungler for an assist, and the enemy will either have to miss the really big wave that you've built up and crashed into his turret, or you are just going to be able to destroy the enemy jungle, because most likely you will be taking Ignite, and your E Soul Unbound is really going to allow you to outduel that jungler because of your level differential, as well as it just being relatively strong in the early game. So always look for these kinds of roams. You are going to just have a insane amount of dueling and kill pressure, and your ability to assist the enemy or your ally jungler against the enemy jungler is going to have a ripple effect across the map. It's going to really allow your jungler to start ganking more lanes. It's going to allow him to start invading the enemy jungler more, and it's going to prevent the enemy jungler from ganking your lane. So this is one of the most effective ways you can look to easily affect the whole map without necessarily having a global ability. And that will wrap up this tip for Yone. Alright, and getting into tip number 4, we're going to go over some of the finer points of your Soul Unbound. So if you didn't know, as soon as you activate your E, this bar is going to light up yellow, and it's going to start counting down from 500, as well as there is going to be a bar under your HP that is going to show when you are going to disappear back to your clone. So people are able to track this pretty easily, as well as it is very easy for you to understand exactly when you are going to be going back into it. So there's a couple of ways you can actually look to extend it. If you ult at the end of it, it will not take you back as long as you are in the ult animation. It will finish that thing. But if you have your E up and you are looking to W, it will pull you back if you are in the W animation too late. So let's try and get that again. I did it right at the end, but it will not extend it if you are in your W animation. You see how it happened there, and then it ended up thrown out right at the end of the E. And then finally, when you throw out your E and you are looking to Q at the end of it, it will finish your Q because it is a dashing animation. So it looks like the dashing animation that comes out of your Mortal Steel and the dashing animation coming out of your Fate Sealed is going to continue and go through on your Soul Unbound, but your W animation won't. So the last thing you'd want to do is waste this ability, as it provides you with a lot of your sustain and survivability in your trades. And that will wrap up this tip. Alright, and jumping into tip number 5 with Yone, I want to talk about optimal team fighting as well as weak and strong sides when playing Yone. If you didn't know, the fat wall, you are unable to do a E over it unless you find some weird spot that I haven't been able to find on this fat wall. So the safer side, or the side that you can look to go more aggressive on, is the skinnier sides of the wall, and it's going to be on the top side on this side of the map, and it's going to be on the bottom of this side. So make sure that you have a good understanding of where you can look to go hyper aggressive and cover a large amount of distance quite easily with your E over. Now, when playing Yone, you are not a front to back team fighter. You are looking to cause as much chaos as possible. Similar to other fighters, you are not a tank. Things like Maokai, Sejuani, Malphite are going to be looking to just peel for their backline and have them do all the damage. And in the exact opposite corner are things like Yone, things like Aurelia, things like Yasuo that want to get on the backline, and you really want to it comes down to this when you are looking for flanks. You want to have commitment on the enemy team, say a Maokai Wing into the enemy or into your team, and then you can look to R in on the enemies and cause as much chaos as possible. The last thing you would want to do is look for a flank and then these 5 people all turn and attack you. You want to use your allies as meat bags. You want to utilize those useless enemy or allied teammates that aren't doing much as buying time for you to do as much as possible. This is extremely important to understand if you have most of the gold on your team, because it is incumbent on you to carry those games where you have the most games. It might not be right, or it might not feel like too good when all your team is feed and you're the only one doing well, but when you have the most resources, you really want to protect those resources. You want to picture yourself as a really big money bag. You do a lot of damage, but if someone kills you, they are going to claim a shitload of gold. So that will wrap up my final tip for Yone. If you have any questions, you can hit me up in the comments down below, and as always guys, take it easy.